Never forget a number of years ago, took a trip out to Indiana, was visiting with a friend doing an evangelism, sort of a mission trip. And they were calling it Revive Indiana. It was fantastic. It was just mobilizing people to go and to pray with people in the community and to share the gospel. It was an incredible experience, and I'll never forget one of the testimonies. And so basically what happens is you kind of gather in the church, have a worship service, and then you group up into groups of 4, and you go and you spread out. At the end of the day, you come back and you tell testimonies, and I'll never forget this one testimony that was absolutely beautiful. But this guy gets up there, and he's talking about his group, and his group went into the community, and they see this guy who's sitting on the front porch of their house. And so they go and they engage with the guy, and they're talking with him, and they say, hey, we're out in the community, we're just blessing people with a prayer. Anything that we can pray for you about. They engage with him, they pray with him, they talk with him a little bit, but the talking's not really going very far. And you can tell there's a lot of distractions going on. The kids are running on the porch, they're going back inside, they're not getting very far in the conversation. Finally, one of the little kids runs back outside and says, Dad, come back in. The AC's out, it's burning up inside, we can't do it. And Dad stands up and he's like, guys, thanks for your time. Basically, we need to cut this short. I got to go take care of the AC. At that point in time, the guy giving the testimony steps out from the back, and he says, actually, AC is what I do. I'm an AC repairman. I know a thing or two about that. Do you mind if I take a peek? And he's like, by all means, come inside. The guy goes inside, starts tinkering with the AC unit. Somehow, by the grace of God, it comes back on. AC is blowing again. Mom and Dad and the kids are so amazed. They're like, by all means, sit and come and tell us about what you came to tell us about. They come and they present the gospel. Not only does Mom and Dad come to faith, one of the children comes to faith at the same time. And here is this guy giving testimony in front of a church, sitting there going, I have never been available to be used by God a day in my life until today. And God somehow used an AC repairman like me. Church, do not underestimate the power of your availability. What God can do in you when you come and say, here is everything that he has given to me. It is AC skills, it may be proclamatory, it may be speaking skills, it may be people skills, it may be whatever the thing may be, but don't underestimate the power of what God can do through your availability. I'm thinking of so many different stories. I actually had a whole list right here, an entire page long, and I'm like, I cannot, but I will think about this one. I was thinking about this one high school student that we went on another trip with. We were doing what was called Search and Rescue, which was with homeless people in downtown Dallas. And it was with Our Calling, which is a ministry out there. But I was thinking about this young, probably a 15 or 16-year-old girl. We went out there doing search and rescue ministry, which is basically going into the woods and finding homeless people that are not coming into the shelters. They're not coming in to get sober. They're not coming in for the jobs or any of the helps or any things like that. And so we would go out and find them. We would put a pin on the map so we'd be able to go back out and bring them resources and continue to care for them exactly where they are. It's an incredible ministry. We went out there this one time, and this group comes, and there's one girl, probably 15 years old, very, very quiet, came in the back. We did the exact same thing. We're engaging with these people. We find this community of tents out in the middle of the woods. I'm up at the front talking with a number of people, trying to pray for them, trying to engage and understand their needs a little bit more. Again, it was one of these ministry experiences that personally for me, it wasn't going very far. It wasn't going very well. Kept feeling like it was hitting all these obstacles. And by the way, that is ministry, by the way. It is not always, hey, yes, I'm saying yes and giving my life over and things like that. Very difficult. I remember sitting there just going like, all right, I'm getting nowhere with these people that are very probably annoyed that we're here to begin with. All of a sudden, this 15-year-old girl steps to the front. Hey, do you mind if I share real quick? And she comes and she stands in front of this group of homeless men that are out there in the middle of the woods. And she goes, 1 year ago, less than 1 year ago, I was the one that was living in this tent in the middle of the woods, strung out on heroin in my life. It's a 15-year-old girl, abandoned by both of her parents, having nowhere to go. She went to live in the woods, was so strung out on heroin, had nothing going on, couldn't go anywhere until a team of people came and found her and shared with her the hope of Jesus Christ. She goes, I came out, I got saved, I came to faith. Everything these men and women are telling you today about who Jesus is absolutely true. And you say yes to him. He can help you come out of these things and you can find life in him today. This 15-year-old girl was able to do in 2 minutes what a team of pastors was not able to do with the rest of their day. Do not underestimate the power of your availability. Do not underestimate the power of a people coming and saying, Jesus, here I am, everything that I am. everything that you've given to me, my story, my baggage, which you've come in and you've redeemed, my testimony, which I've hidden onto because I've been so ashamed of it, you've come and brought life into it. Don't underestimate the power of a story shared. Don't underestimate what God may want to do through your time. And some of you are in this season where you're sitting there going, you know what? I've got a lot more availability than I've ever had in my entire life. Don't underestimate what God may want to be doing in you in these moments and times in your life when you're coming and saying yes for the very first time. Jesus, would you come and would you bring your power through me, all for your praise and for his glory. This is what he does over and over and over again. He's not looking for the A team. He's not looking for the best of the best, however those words may even be defined. He doesn't need any things. Why? Because with Christ and with the power of the indwelling Holy Spirit, your availability trumps your ability every single day of the week and twice on Tuesday. And here's Peter and James and John. James and John, definitely B-teamers that were sent home. It says that they're amazed, they're a little bit freaked out by what Jesus is able to do with their absolutely nothing, right? They're out there fishing and all of a sudden, like their boats are overflowing with fish. Like, how in the world did you do that? I tried that trick before. It doesn't work when I'm out there fishing. They're freaked out. And I love what Jesus says in verse 10. He simply comes to them and he says, hey, don't be afraid, because from now on, you're going to be fishers of men and women, people. I'm going to go and I'm going to make you fishers of people. It's the yoke that he's calling us to wear, that we be fishers of people, gathering of people, helping other people find and follow him. And not just doing it with the words of Jesus, but also doing it in the way of Christ, so that people would actually be one and not just wiped out, as we talked about a couple weeks back. And so I love the image that he uses right here, because we understand what it's like to go fishing. How many of you guys would say, hey, you love fishing? Fishing is your thing. Anybody good at fishing? I think I'm probably the worst fisherman on the planet. The absolute worst fisherman on the planet. I go out there and I never catch anything. Like, I've tried that trick, casting on the other side of the boat, on the other side of the dock, on the other side of the lake, and never come up with anything. In fact, I never would do anything until I started taking my son fishing. And I think the Lord was like, I'm going to humble you a little bit. First time I took Caleb when he was like 4 years old, we cast out. He catches this massive bass. I was actually mad at my 4-year-old son. I'm like, how did you do that? Like, that is not okay. Like, how did you do that? I was like, I can't tell you how many like professional, like chartered fishermen, we go out like deep sea fishing and they come back and they're like, I don't know how to explain what, I don't know. Like, we typically catch something. And I'm like, I know how to explain it. I was on this boat. Like, I ruined it for you. And so, and I love the imagery here, because we get the different ways to fish. We get that much like fish, people are very, very different. There's a lot of different ways to fish. Like, some people are doing spear fishing nowadays. Like, some people are noodling, right? Like you put your arm back into like this deep creek thing, and like the catfish eats you, and somehow you catch the fish. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but like that's a thing that people are doing. I was watching a video, and the guy was using a leaf on the water, and he was just kind of like tickling the water with a leaf. And all of a sudden, this giant bass comes up, and I'm like, I've never done any of these things before. And but I love the imagery, because you're sitting there kind of going, yeah, there's a lot of different bait that catches different types of fish. And much like fish, people are very, very different. And there's so many different people that are out there. Jesus is saying, you want to follow me, then you have to understand that the mission is about the people. The mission is all about going, you're going to be catching fish, that it's all about the people. And much like fish, there's so many different types of people. And there's some people that are like deep thinkers, and the thing that they need to be able to understand the truths of Jesus Christ, like they need the arguments, they need the rationale. They need those books, and they need the studies, they need the apologetics, and they need to understand how the things fit together. How many of you, you're kind of like, yeah, that's me. It's like, I needed to understand how things made sense, and I need to understand that there was depth to the faith that we're called to follow and things like that. And yet there's other people that are sitting going, yeah, that's not exactly where I am. I'm not all happy times. I'm in this place where I don't want you to keep talking. I don't want you to keep explaining it. I don't need another argument or more rationale. What I need to know is if there actually is a God in heaven who loves me. And I need to know if there's actually a God who cares. I need to see you care. In the same way that the God you represent, you say that you represent, actually cares. There's other people in these places that are sitting there going, just stop talking. I don't need all the talking. I need to see if you actually care. if you actually love, that this God that you represent, who's supposed to be defined by love, if you actually love in the way that he actually loves, this is why we see Jesus spend probably more time caring for people than he does sharing all these truths and realities about who he is. And it's this fascinating thing about following Jesus, that he's just out there with the people, and he's just caring for the people. And he's giving his life for the people. He's already quoted this in Isaiah in chapter 4, on the Sabbath in the synagogue in chapter 4. But he's in the Sabbath, and this is right after the temptation, the beginning of his ministry. He goes in there and he quotes Isaiah, and he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Why? Because he's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. In other words, he's out there, and there is a time for sharing. There is a time for proclaiming. This is who I actually am. He's sitting there in the synagogue, and he's going, yeah, I am the one that you've been waiting for. I am the Messiah that you've been waiting your entire life for, the one that the prophets speak about. This is who I am. You need to understand, I am the fulfillment of this. But he says, but look what he says next. He says, he's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. This is who he comes to. This is who he's coming after. Notice what he says. He's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. And so there's absolutely a time to proclaim the good news. But notice the people that he's going to. He's going to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free. These are the people that Jesus keeps going to over and over and over again. And yes, there is a spiritual element to this whole thing. Nevertheless, it is very literally who he keeps going to over and over and over again. I mean, the very next scene in chapter 5, he touches a man with leprosy, and he heals him of his leprosy. The very next scene, it's a paralytic who is not able to walk. And so we read in Matthew chapter 4, it says that his fame began to spread, and they brought to Jesus all who were sick, all of those who are afflicted with various diseases and pains, people who are oppressed by demons, and those who are having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. And so we read in verse 25 that great crowds began to follow Jesus. Why? Because he's not just sharing and bringing the 4 spiritual laws and preaching only repentance all the time or anything like that. He's not just sharing, he's also caring. And he's not just sitting with people and things like that. He is proclaiming the truth of who he actually is. Why? Because Christ came to undo everything that sin destroyed. Everything that sin destroyed back there in the garden, Christ came to undo. One day, still future, he's going to return again, make all things brand new. No more suffering, no more cries, no more tears, and no more pain. Why? Because Christ came to undo everything that sin destroyed. And so back in the garden, the biggest thing that he came to undo was the spiritual fracture between God and man that does exist because of our sin. But back in the garden, we see that it was supposed to be co-equal image bearers of God, working together for the good of creation. And now all of a sudden we see things like abandonment. We see divorce. We see pain. We see suffering. We see neglect. We see power struggles and all these things. And so Jesus, again, isn't just coming up and passing out tracts with 4 spiritual laws and things like that. Instead, more than 60 times all throughout the New Testament, he comes and he's preaching about how to love one another, how to give for the good of one another, how to serve the other people, how to lay down your life for the good of other people. And then he's not just preaching about it and talking about those lessons or anything like that. He actually goes and he does it. We see him eating with the tax collectors and the sinners at the end of chapter 5. Like some of us came in here today and you're sitting there going, hey, is this Jesus even for me? And he's sitting there going like, this is who I came for. This is who I spent time with. The poor, the oppressed, the blind, the lame, those who can't see, the tax collectors, the scum of the earth as society would define the scum of the earth. The sinners as society would label the sinners. He's going, that's whose home I'm going into. And he's not just preaching about it, he's going to them. Why? Because Christ came to undo everything that sin destroyed. Chapter 7, he goes and he's defending and forgiving a woman who's caught in the very literal act of adultery. Why? Because again, Christ came to undo everything that sin destroyed. Back in the garden, there was an abundance of provision. In other words, there's food upon food upon food. No one's hungry, no one's cold, no one's thirsty, any of these things. Now we're talking about things like homelessness and joblessness and a terrible economy. And how are we going to pay the bills? And a ground that doesn't want to be worked. And so we care about these things too. Why? Because Jesus cared about these things. And then he said things like, yeah, whatever you do for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, it's like you're doing it unto me. In other words, when you help them get food, it's like you're doing it unto me. When you give them a drink, it's like you're doing it unto me. You give them something to wear, it's like you're doing it unto me. The people are sitting there kind of going, hey, Jesus, when do we do any of these things for you? And he says, when you did it unto them, it's like you did it unto me. This is the heart of our Christ. coming to undo everything that sin destroyed. Not just 4 spiritual laws. Although that is the greatest fracture that exists, he came to undo everything sin destroyed. Back in the garden, there's supposed to be peace and unity with the Father and with one another. And now we're talking about all kinds of things like cancel culture and tribalism and racism and nationalism and all kinds of other isms that are out there. Meanwhile, Paul's going to say in Ephesians chapter 2 that Jesus came and he preached peace to those who are far away and peace to those who are already near. Why? Because the same sacrifice through Christ, we both have access to the Father by the same Spirit. Christ coming to undo everything sin destroyed. Back in the garden, there was supposed to be perfect health, perfect strength. Now we're talking about things like sickness and disease and pain and natural disasters and COVID and cancer and Parkinson's and all kinds of things like that. And so you better believe that Jesus didn't just come to bring the 4 spiritual laws. He came to the sick. Why? So that he could heal the sick. Because one day still future, there's going to be no more sickness. That Christ came and he went to the hungry so that they could eat, because one day he's going to bring satisfaction like we've never even begun to imagine. He came to the possessed and he prayed for the possessed. Why? So that they would know what freedom tastes like. And he went to the lame and he touched the lame so that they'd be able to dance again. And he touched the eyes of the blind so that they would be able to see. Why? Because Christ came to undo everything that sin destroyed. And because Christ did, his fame continued to grow. And it says that large crowds began to follow him. Church, this is how we fish. It's how we fish. It's how we be a people who are helping other people find and follow Christ. We don't just share, we care. And we don't just care, we come and we share. We don't create false dichotomies and say, okay, are we going to go help them or are we going to preach to them? Kind of like saying, which is your favorite leg? The right one or the left one? I need both of them. I kind of need both of them to be able to stand up well. We don't create false dichotomies. We come preaching the words of Christ, doing it in the way of Christ. Not just the message, but the way. Sharing in the heart of Christ, recognizing that the mission is people. It's you. It's me. As far as we are, isolated, lonely, addicted, numb in our affections, thinking there's no way that a holy God would have anything for me, God in his infinite love fixed his love upon you. And he sent you his one and only Son to come and to live that sinless, perfect life, which you know you're well short of, which I know I'm well short of. He did it for you. He went to the cross and he suffered and he bled and he died as a substitute. Why? So that his righteousness could be gifted to you, that you could have right standing and cleansing and live with him today and for all of eternity in him. It is the incredible, incredible love of the Father. And here it is, a church that is available for both sharing and for caring will also see large crowds begin to follow him. The question I want to ask you today is, how available are you today? How available are you today? When Jesus is calling, you've heard his voice. When Jesus is calling, are you willing to leave it all behind, to drop what you're doing, to go and to follow him? How available are you actually today?